I froze hearing my daughter-in-law whisper to my son, "Double the dose. The old hag's heart stops tonight, and the inheritance is ours." He just nodded. They would learn exactly who they had underestimated. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe to the channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. The words hung in the air of the hallway like poison. I had been shuffling toward the kitchen for a glass of water, my orthopedic slippers silent on the hardwood floor. The door to Marcus's study was cracked open, and Vanessa's voice carried clearly through the gap. "Her heart medication is already weakened from what I've been giving her," Vanessa continued. "One strong dose in her evening tea, and by morning it looks like natural cardiac arrest. The coroner won't suspect a thing. I know exactly how these things work." I pressed my back against the wall, my own heart, the one they were planning to stop, pounding so hard I was certain they could hear it. My legs felt like they might give out. I gripped my walker with both hands, willing myself to stay upright, to stay silent. "What about the will?" Marcus asked, his voice, my son's voice, the baby I had nursed through colic, the boy I had driven to Little League practice every Saturday, the man I had welcomed back into my home after his law practice collapsed. That voice, discussing my murder like a business transaction. "Already handled. I have the new version ready. She signed it last week when she was confused from the sedatives. Everything goes to you, and the house gets sold immediately. Gerald at Century 21 already has a buyer lined up. Cash offer, $1.2 million. 12 years. That's how long they had lived under my roof." Vanessa had lost her pharmacist license in 2019, something about missing controlled substances, though Marcus insisted it was a misunderstanding. I had believed him. I had believed her tears, her promises to get better, her gratitude when I said they could stay as long as they needed. The family portrait on the wall across from me seemed to mock everything I thought I knew. Last Christmas, all of us smiling. Marcus with his arm around me, Vanessa holding the pie she had baked. We looked happy. We looked like a family. I made myself move, one step, then another, retreating down the hallway toward my bedroom. Each footfall felt like a thunderclap, but they kept talking, too absorbed in their plans to notice. Back in my room, I lowered myself onto the bed and stared at the ceiling. The water stain above my head had been there for 30 years, since the roof leaked during Hurricane Floyd. Frank had always meant to fix it. Frank, my husband of 43 years, dead just 8 months ago from a stroke that came out of nowhere. The thought hit me like a physical blow. Frank had been healthy, active. He walked 3 miles every morning and hadn't touched red meat in a decade. The doctors called it a massive hemorrhagic stroke, said it could happen to anyone. But Vanessa had been adjusting his blood pressure medication for months before he died, claiming she was optimizing his treatment. I sat up slowly, my hands trembling, the malastares, the dizzy spells, the confusion that had been getting worse for weeks. I had blamed it on grief, on age, on the natural decline of a 68-year-old body that had been through too much. But now I understood. They had been poisoning me, slowly, carefully, building up to tonight. I looked at the nightstand where Vanessa left my evening medications every day at 6 p.m., arranged neatly in a little plastic organizer she had bought to help me remember. The pills I had been swallowing without question, trusting my daughter-in-law to take care of me. The bedroom door opened. I had just enough time to lie back and close my eyes, forcing my breath to slow, my face to relax into sleep. "She's out," Vanessa said softly. I heard her footsteps approach the bed, felt her shadow fall across my face. Good. The sedative in her afternoon tea worked faster than I expected. "Are you sure about tonight?" Marcus's voice came from the doorway. For a moment, just a moment, I heard something that might have been hesitation. "We've been over this. The longer we wait, the more risk. And we need the money, Marcus. You know what happens if we don't pay Vincent back by the end of the month." Vincent. I didn't know that name, but I filed it away, adding it to the list of things I needed to understand if I was going to survive the next 12 hours. "It just feels," Marcus trailed off. "It feels like what? She's 68 years old with a bad heart. She's had a good life. And let's be honest, she was never going to accept what happened with my license. never going to stop looking at me like I was some kind of criminal. I kept my eyes closed, kept my breathing steady, even as rage burned through me like acid. Criminal. She was right about that much. Check her pulse, Vanessa said. Make sure the sedative hasn't affected her heart rate too much. We need her stable enough to make it through dinner. I felt Marcus's fingers on my wrist, cool and clinical. The touch of my son, the child I would have died for, checking to make sure I was alive enough to kill later. 62 beats per minute, he reported. She's fine. Perfect. I'll start preparing the tea. You make sure everything in the study is locked. We don't need her wandering in there if she wakes up early. Their footsteps retreated. The door clicked shut. The ceiling fan turned slowly above me, casting shadows that shifted like conspirators whispering in the dark. My mind raced through options, discarding each one as quickly as it formed. Call 911? My cell phone was in the kitchen, where Vanessa had insisted I leave it, so I wouldn't lose it. The landline in my room had been disconnected last month. Marcus claimed it was to save money on the phone bill. My bad knee and the walker would get me maybe 50 feet before they caught up. And where would I go? The nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and my car keys had disappeared weeks ago. Fight? At 68, with a heart condition they had likely been worsening for months, against a 45-year-old man and a woman who knew exactly which drugs would kill me fastest? I couldn't fight. I couldn't run. I couldn't call for help. But I could think, and I could plan. I had run a household for over 4 decades. I had managed Frank's hardware store through 2 recessions. I had raised 2 children, Marcus, who apparently wanted me dead, and my daughter Christine in Boston, who I hadn't spoken to in 3 months because Vanessa always seemed to be nearby when she called. Christine, my granddaughter Emily, who was married to a police detective, family that didn't live under this roof, that Vanessa couldn't control. If I could reach them, if I could survive long enough to get a message out. I heard footsteps in the hallway again and quickly closed my eyes. The door opened. Mom? Marcus's voice, gentle now, the mask back in place. Mom, it's almost time for dinner. Vanessa made your favorite, chicken pot pie. I let myself stir slowly, blinking as if waking from deep sleep. What time is it? Almost 6. Come on, let me help you up. He took my arm, and I let him guide me to standing. I leaned on my walker and shuffled toward the door, playing the frail old woman they believed me to be. In the hallway, I paused at the family portrait. Marcus, at 7, gap-toothed and beaming, holding up the fish he'd caught at Lake Anna. The memory of that day, the pride in his eyes, the way he'd insisted I take the picture immediately, felt like it belonged to someone else's life. Just remembering, I said. Your father would have loved to see you grown up. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Guilt? Grief? It was gone before I could name it. Come on. Dinner's getting cold. The dining room table was set with my good china, the Wedgwood that had been my mother's, 3 place settings, cloth napkins, a small vase of flowers from my garden. It looked like a celebration. Vanessa emerged from the kitchen carrying a steaming pot pie, her smile wide and warm. There you are. I was starting to worry the sedative. She caught herself, that you were sleeping too soundly. Sit, I'll serve. I lowered myself into my usual chair, the one facing the doorway to the living room. From here I could see the front entrance, the stairs to the 2nd floor, and the window overlooking the driveway. I had chosen this seat 40 years ago for the view of the garden. Now I chose it to see who might come, and who might go. Vanessa placed a plate in front of me, the crust golden and perfect. I made your chamomile tea too. Extra honey, just how you like it. The teacup sat beside my plate, steam rising from the amber liquid. I stared at it, wondering how much death was dissolved in that sweetness. Thank you, dear, I said. You're always so thoughtful. I picked up my fork and took a small bite of pot pie. It was delicious. Vanessa was an excellent cook. I had always said so. I chewed slowly, watching her watch me. Aren't you going to drink your tea? It'll get cold. I smiled at my daughter-in-law, the woman who was planning to murder me within hours. I'm saving it, I said. I like to let it cool a bit. Old lady's sensitive tongue. Something shifted behind Vanessa's eyes. Not suspicion. Not yet. Just the faintest flicker of impatience. Of course, she said. Take your time. I took another bite of pot pie and let my gaze drift toward the living room doorway. The shadows there seemed deeper than usual, as if the house itself was holding its breath. Tonight, they planned to kill me. But I was Evelyn Foster. I had survived breast cancer at 52, bankruptcy at 61, and widowhood at 67. I had buried my parents, my husband, and too many friends to count. I would not be buried by my own son. The tea cooled untouched beside my plate, and I began to plan. I survived the first night by pretending to drink. Every time Vanessa looked away, I let a few drops of tea spill into the napkin on my lap. When she insisted on refilling my cup, I brought it to my lips and tilted it just enough to wet them without swallowing. 43 years of marriage to a man who could spot a fake smile across a crowded room had taught me how to perform. By 9 p.m., I had complained of exhaustion and retreated to my bedroom. I heard them whispering in the hallway, Vanessa's voice tight with frustration. She barely drank any of it. Maybe she just wasn't thirsty. Marcus, I measured that dose exactly. If she didn't get enough, we'll have to try again tomorrow. Tomorrow. I had bought myself one day. I lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me. At 11:30, I heard their bedroom door close. At midnight, the light under my door finally went out. I waited another hour, watching the red numbers on my alarm clock crawl forward before I moved. The walker was too loud. I left it by the bed and gripped the furniture instead, moving from dresser to doorframe to hallway table. My knee screamed with every step, but I had learned to move through pain decades ago. The study was at the end of the hallway. Marcus had locked it, just as Vanessa instructed. But he had forgotten something important. I had lived in this house for 40 years. I knew every loose floorboard, every sticking door, every hiding place. The key to the study hung on a hook inside the linen closet, behind Frank's old fishing tackle. I had put it there myself in 1986, back when Marcus was a teenager who kept sneaking in to use the computer. The lock clicked open, and I slipped inside. Marcus's desk was covered in papers, bank statements showing accounts I had never seen. One in the Caymans with a balance of $47,000, another in Delaware with $12,000. Credit card bills totaling over $180,000, and letters. Dozens of letters from someone named Vincent Castellano, each one more threatening than the last. You have until October 31st to repay the full amount. After that, we will pursue alternative collection methods. The date on the letter was October 15th. 2 weeks ago. I photographed everything with the old digital camera Frank kept in the desk drawer. It was ancient. He had bought it in 2009, but it still worked, and it was silent. In the bottom drawer, I found what I was really looking for, a manila folder labeled Estate Planning in Vanessa's neat handwriting. Inside was a will, my will supposedly, dated 3 weeks ago. My signature at the bottom looked almost right, almost. But I had never signed this document. I had never seen it before this moment. The will left everything to Marcus, the house, the savings, the life insurance policy that Frank had increased to $800,000 just before he died. $800,000 that I had never known about, that Frank had never mentioned. Frank, my practical, careful husband who had run a hardware store for 30 years and taught me to balance a checkbook before our wedding. He would never have increased his life insurance without telling me, unless he didn't know about it either. I found the policy documents beneath the will. The beneficiary had been changed from me to Marcus 6 weeks before Frank's death. The signature looked nothing like Frank's handwriting. My hands shook as I photographed the pages. Whatever I had suspected, this was worse. This wasn't just about killing me for the inheritance. They had already killed Frank, and they had been planning it for months. I put everything back exactly as I had found it and crept out of the study. The clock on the hallway wall read 2:47 a.m. In a few hours, Vanessa would bring my morning medications. I needed to be back in bed, pretending nothing had changed. But first, I had to find a way to reach Christine. The house phone was dead, of course. My cell phone was in the kitchen, where Vanessa could check it any time. But there was one option they hadn't thought of. Frank had set up an old computer up there years ago for his eBay business. selling vintage tools and hardware he collected at estate sales. After he died, Marcus had moved his office into the study and forgotten about the dusty machine under the eaves. The attic stairs were in the back hallway, hidden behind a door that looked like a closet. I pulled myself up one step at a time, my arms doing most of the work while my knees screamed in protest. By the time I reached the top, I was drenched in sweat and fighting back tears. But the computer was still there, and when I pressed the power button, it hummed to life. The internet connection was ancient, the old DSL line Frank had refused to cancel because it was cheaper than upgrading. It took 4 minutes for my email to load, 4 minutes of sitting in the darkness, barely breathing, listening for any sound from below. Christine's email address was saved in my contacts. My daughter, 2,000 miles away in Boston, completely unaware that her mother was about to be murdered. I typed as fast as my arthritic fingers would allow. Christine, I don't have time to explain everything, but I need help. Marcus and Vanessa are planning something terrible. They've been drugging me. I think they may have done something to your father, too. Please don't call the house. They monitor everything. I need you to contact someone who can help. I love you. Mom. I hit send and watched the screen. The message disappeared into the outbox. A moment later, the sent folder updated, but there was no way to know if it had actually arrived. No confirmation that Christine had received it. No guarantee that she would check her email before it was too late. I shut down the computer and made my way back downstairs, each step more painful than the last. By the time I reached my bedroom, my knee was swollen to twice its normal size, and I could barely stand. I lowered myself onto the bed and lay in the darkness, watching the sky outside my window turn from black to gray to pale morning blue. At 7 a.m., the door opened. Good morning, Mom. Vanessa's voice was bright and cheerful. How are we feeling today? I made myself blink slowly, groggily. Tired. My knee hurts. Well, let's get your morning medications in you, and then I'll make you a nice breakfast. She handed me the pills, 4 of them, each a different color. I recognized my blood pressure medication and my heart pills. The other 2 were unfamiliar. What are these? I asked, pointing to the unknown tablets. Just vitamins, B12 and D. Remember Dr. Coleman said you were deficient? Coleman, Vanessa's brother-in-law, the doctor who had taken over my care after Frank died, who had prescribed all these medications that Vanessa administered. I put the pills in my mouth and accepted the glass of water she offered. But I had learned a few tricks from my late husband's mother, who had survived 2 strokes and a nursing home by refusing to take pills she didn't trust. I tucked the unknown tablets under my tongue and swallowed only water. Good, Vanessa said, watching me closely. Now what would you like for breakfast? I was thinking scrambled eggs and toast. That sounds lovely, dear. The moment she left, I spat the pills into my hand and looked at them. Small, white, unmarked. Nothing that should be in any prescription bottle I had ever seen. I wrapped them in a tissue and hid them in the pocket of my robe. Evidence, if I survived long enough to use it. The morning passed slowly. I ate the breakfast Vanessa prepared, watched the tea she brought go cold, complained of stomach upset to avoid lunch. Every hour, I wondered if Christine had received my message. Every hour, I watched Vanessa's face for any sign that she had discovered what I had done. At 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. I heard Vanessa answer it, her voice shifting from surprise to suspicion. Mrs. Patterson, what brings you here? Dorothy Patterson, my neighbor from down the road, the one Vanessa had been turning away for months with excuses about my health, my need for rest, my preference for privacy. I brought some of my strawberry preserves for Evelyn. She always loved them. That's very kind, but she's sleeping right now. I'll make sure she gets them. I'd like to see her if you don't mind. Just for a minute. I'm afraid that's not possible. Doctor's orders. Through my bedroom door, I could hear the exchange clearly. Dorothy was persistent. She had raised 4 children and faced down the Richmond zoning board twice. But Vanessa was better. Perhaps another time, Dorothy said finally. Her voice sounded wrong somehow. Concerned? Suspicious? You tell Evelyn I was asking about her." The door closed. Footsteps retreated down the driveway. And just like that, my last connection to the outside world was gone. Or so Vanessa thought. That night, after dinner, another meal I barely touched, another tea I pretended to drink, I claimed exhaustion and went to bed early again. I waited until midnight, then made the painful journey back to the attic. The computer took longer to boot this time. When my email finally loaded, my heart nearly stopped. One new message from Christine. "Mom, I'm on my way. Don't trust anyone. Emily's husband Michael is a detective. He's coming with us. We'll be there by Friday morning. Stay safe. I love you. C. Friday morning, 2 days away." I read the message 3 times, committing every word to memory. Then I deleted it, cleared the browser history, and shut down the computer. 2 days. I just had to survive for 2 more days. As I crept back down the attic stairs, I heard voices from the kitchen below. Marcus and Vanessa arguing. "She's not taking enough of the medication. Her heart rate is barely affected. Then we increase the dose at dinner tomorrow. And if that doesn't work, then we move to Plan B." I froze on the stairs, my hand gripping the railing so hard my knuckles went white. She falls. Old woman, bad knee, stairs in the middle of the night. Accidents happen all the time. I made myself keep moving, one silent step at a time, until I reached my bedroom and closed the door behind me. I had to stay alive for 2 more days, and I had to make sure I wasn't anywhere near those stairs when Plan B went into effect. The next morning, I discovered how deep the betrayal really went. Vanessa left for her weekly yoga class at 9 a.m., a 2-hour commitment that gave Marcus and me rare time alone. He sat in the living room watching cable news, barely acknowledging my presence as I shuffled past with my walker. "I'm going to rest in the sunroom," I said. "The light is good for my eyes." He grunted without looking up. The sunroom faced the backyard, away from the driveway and the road. More importantly, it was directly below Marcus's study, and the window that Frank had always left slightly open because the room got stuffy. I settled into the wicker chair and waited until I heard Marcus go to the kitchen for coffee. Then I opened the sunroom window as wide as it would go. Voices carried surprisingly well through old houses. When Marcus returned to the study to make a phone call, I heard every word. "Gerald, it's Marcus Foster. I wanted to confirm the timeline on the house sale." "Yes, I understand the buyer wants to close quickly. That won't be a problem. My mother's health is declining rapidly. The doctors expect, yes, within the week." Within the week. The doctors. Coleman, who had never examined me without Vanessa present. Coleman, whose medical opinion would support whatever cause of death they needed. The full asking price is $1.2 million. Once the estate clears probate, and with the new will, that should be straightforward, we can proceed immediately. I appreciate your discretion in this matter. He ended the call. A moment later, I heard him dial again. "Vincent, it's Marcus. I need more time. The temperature in the sunroom seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vincent, the name from the threatening letters. I understand the deadline, but I can't move the money until after— No, listen to me. By November 5th, I'll have access to everything. The house, the insurance, the accounts. $1.2 million plus $800,000 in life insurance. You'll get your $400,000 and we'll be done. $400,000. My son owed someone named Vincent Castellano $400,000, and he was planning to pay that debt with my blood. Just give me until the 5th. I'm handling it. Plan B if necessary, but it'll look natural, I promise you." The call ended. I sat frozen in the sunroom, watching the morning light shift across the garden I had planted 30 years ago. I thought about Marcus at 8 years old, crying when his goldfish died, insisting we have a proper funeral in the backyard. I thought about him at 18, asking to borrow money for prom, promising to pay it back from his summer job. I thought about him at 35, standing next to Frank at the hardware store, learning the business he would eventually run into the ground. When had my son become a man who could kill his mother for money? When had the boy who cried over goldfish turned into someone who discussed my death as Plan B? The answer, I realized, was Vanessa. Not because she had corrupted him. I wasn't naive enough to believe that. But because she had given him permission. She had shown him that the rules didn't apply to people like them, that taking what you wanted was acceptable, as long as you were smart enough not to get caught. I heard the front door open. Vanessa was back early. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." I positioned myself to hear their conversation, pretending to doze in my chair. "Dorothy Patterson came to my yoga class. She was asking questions about your mother, saying she looked not herself the last time she saw her, months ago, but she's suspicious. She said she might contact Christine to check in." A long pause. Then Marcus's voice, cold and businesslike. "We need to move up the timeline. Tonight, before Dorothy starts making calls, before anyone else gets involved." I stopped breathing. "What about the medication approach?" Vanessa asked. "If we do it too fast, Plan B. You were right. An accident is cleaner, less evidence for any medical examiner to find. The stairs, after dinner. She has trouble with them anyway. Everyone knows that. She gets disoriented at night, loses her balance, falls. Tragic, but not surprising." I heard footsteps approaching the sunroom. I forced my eyes closed, my face slack, my breathing slow and even. "Mom?" Marcus's voice was soft. "Mom, are you awake?" "She's out," he said to Vanessa. "Good. Let's get everything ready." They walked away, and I lay in the sunroom with the sun warm on my face and murder settling into the walls around me. Tonight. They were going to kill me tonight. I had counted on 2 more days. Christine wouldn't arrive until Friday morning. Michael, her son-in-law the detective, wasn't coming until Friday. I had thought I could survive, thought I could hide and wait and play the frail old woman until help arrived. But I was wrong. And now I was out of time. I opened my eyes and looked at the garden. The roses Frank had planted for our 25th anniversary were still blooming, defiant against the October chill. The birdbath where cardinals gathered every morning sat empty in the afternoon sun. The bench where Frank proposed to me 50 years ago needed repainting. If I died tonight, all of this would belong to Marcus, to Vanessa. They would sell it to pay off their debts, tear it down, replace it with something new and profitable. Everything Frank and I had built would be erased as thoroughly as if we had never existed, unless I fought back. I made my way to the study while they were in the kitchen preparing dinner. The key was still in the linen closet, and the lock opened as silently as before. I didn't have time to photograph everything this time. I took the falsified will, the forged insurance documents, the letters from Vincent Castellano. I took the bank statements showing the offshore accounts. I rolled them together and tucked them into the waistband of my pants, beneath my loose cardigan. Then I went to the attic one more time. The computer seemed slower than ever. My email took forever to load, but when it finally appeared, there was a new message from Christine. "Mom, change of plans. Michael's captain approved emergency leave. We're driving through the night and will be there by tomorrow morning, Thursday, around 9 a.m. Michael is bringing another officer. Just hold on, we're coming. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. That was less than 15 hours away. I typed a reply with trembling fingers. They're moving tonight. Planning to make it look like an accident. The stairs. I have evidence hidden. I'll try to stall, but I don't know if I can make it. If something happens, tell Michael to check the false bottom in my jewelry box. I love you both. Tell Emily I'm proud of her." I hit send and watched the message disappear. Then I deleted everything again, cleared the history, and shut down the computer. 15 hours. I had to survive 15 more hours. The evidence was tucked against my stomach, hidden beneath layers of fabric. If they found it, they would know I had been investigating. They would know I knew, and they would accelerate their plans even further. I made my way back downstairs, each step measured and careful. In the bedroom, I transferred the documents to the jewelry box, a mahogany case that had belonged to my grandmother, with a false bottom my mother had shown me when I was 12. "Always have somewhere to hide your secrets," she had told me. "You never know when you might need them." I settled onto my bed and waited for dinner to be ready. At 6 p.m., Vanessa called me to the table. The meal was elaborate. roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans with almonds, a feast for the condemned. "We wanted to make tonight special," Vanessa said, her smile wide and warm. "A celebration of family." I looked at her across the table, this woman who had lived in my house for 12 years, eaten my food, worn the sweaters I knitted, accepted my hugs at every holiday. This woman who was going to push me down the stairs in a few hours and watch me die. "How lovely," I said. "You're always so thoughtful, Vanessa. Well, you've been so good to us. Taking us in after Marcus's practice failed, letting us stay all these years." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You deserve to be celebrated." I picked up my fork and began to eat, watching the clock on the wall tick toward whatever they had planned. After dinner, Vanessa brought out tea. 3 cups this time, 1 for each of us. "I thought we could sit in the living room tonight," she said. "Watch something on television together. Quality family time." Quality family time before they killed me. The irony was almost laughable. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "Let me just use the bathroom first." I walked to the downstairs powder room and locked the door behind me. Through the small window, I could see the driveway, the road, the darkness gathering outside. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., Christine and Michael and help and safety. I just had to survive until then. I looked at myself in the mirror. Evelyn Foster, 68 years old, widow, mother, grandmother. A woman who had always believed that family meant something. A woman who had trusted her son. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone harder, someone colder, someone who understood that survival sometimes meant becoming a person you didn't recognize. I flushed the toilet, washed my hands, and opened the door. The living room was warm and well lit. Marcus sat in his father's old recliner. Vanessa had taken the love seat, leaving me the chair closest to the stairs. Of course, they needed me near the stairs. "I think I'll sit over here instead," I said, moving toward the couch against the far wall. "The draft from the window bothers my neck." Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Frustration, quickly hidden. "Whatever makes you comfortable, Mom." I settled onto the couch and picked up my tea. The cup was warm against my hands, the liquid dark with whatever they had added this time. "To family," Vanessa said, raising her cup. "To family," Marcus echoed. I lifted my cup but didn't drink. "To family," I repeated, watching them both over the rim. We sat in the living room as the clock struck 8, then 9, then 10. I pretended to sip my tea. I pretended to watch television. I pretended to be the frail, trusting old woman they believed I was. But inside, I was counting down the hours. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I just had to make it until then. At 10:30 p.m., I made my move. "I'm exhausted," I announced, setting down the cold tea I had been pretending to drink for hours. "I think I'll head up to bed." Vanessa's eyes darted to Marcus. A look passed between them, something hungry, expectant. "Let me help you, Mom," Marcus said, rising from his chair. "Those stairs can be tricky at night." I let him take my arm, leaning into his support more heavily than necessary. Let him think I was weak. Let him think I was trusting. Let him think I had no idea what was about to happen. We reached the bottom of the stairs. The hallway was dim, lit only by the small lamp on the side table. Perfect conditions for an accident. "I can make it from here," I said, gripping the banister. "Are you sure? I don't want you to fall." The words hung in the air between us. I looked at my son, really looked at him, and saw the calculation behind his concern. He was waiting, positioning himself, getting ready to push. "Actually," I said, "I forgot my reading glasses in the sunroom. Would you mind getting them for me? I won't be able to sleep without my crossword puzzle." Frustration flickered across his face. "Can't it wait until tomorrow? You know how I am about my puzzles. Just take a minute." He glanced toward the living room, where Vanessa was watching from the doorway. "Fine, stay right here. Don't try to go up without me." The moment he disappeared toward the sunroom, I moved. Not up the stairs. That's where they expected me to be. Instead, I turned left, toward the guest bedroom on the ground floor that had once been Frank's home office. The room had a lock on the inside. Frank had installed it when Marcus was a teenager, back when he needed a place to work without interruption. The key was hidden in the doorframe, exactly where Frank had left it 20 years ago. I slipped inside and turned the lock behind me. The click was barely audible, but to my ears it sounded like salvation. "Mom?" Marcus's voice came from the hallway. "Mom, where are you?" I stood perfectly still, barely breathing. "She's not on the stairs." That was Vanessa. "Check the bathroom." Footsteps moved past the door. The bathroom door opened and closed. "She's not here. Where could she have gone? Check all the rooms. She can't have gotten far." I looked around the office in the darkness. Frank's old desk was still here, covered in dust. The filing cabinet where he kept his most important documents. The window that looked out onto the side yard. And the phone. Frank's landline extension. The one Marcus hadn't thought to disconnect because he'd forgotten this room existed. I lifted the receiver and listened. Dial tone. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely press the numbers. 911 was the obvious choice, but would they arrive in time? Would the dispatcher believe me? I dialed a different number, the one Christine had included in her email, Michael's cell phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. "Hello?" A man's voice, tired but alert. "Michael, it's Evelyn Foster, Christine's mother." "Mrs. Foster, we're about 4 hours away. Is everything okay?" "They're going to kill me tonight. They're looking for me right now. I've locked myself in the ground floor office, but a heavy knock on the door." "Mom? Mom, are you in there?" "I hear them," Michael said, his voice suddenly sharp. "Mrs. Foster, I need you to stay on the line. I'm calling Richmond PD right now on my other phone. Stay hidden and don't open that door for anyone." "Mom, what are you doing?" "Open the door." I didn't respond. I pressed the phone against my ear, listening to Michael's muffled voice coordinating with someone else. "Evelyn, I have Richmond police dispatching now. ETA 15 minutes. Can you hold on that long?" The doorknob rattled, then silence, then Vanessa's voice, calm and cold. "Evelyn, I know you can hear me. Open this door right now, or things are going to get much worse for you." I looked at the window. It was small, but I might be able to fit through. The side yard led to the fence, and beyond that, Dorothy Patterson's property. "Michael, I'm going to try to get out through the window." "No, stay where you are. Help is coming." "I can't stay here. They're going to break down the door." A loud thud against the wood. Marcus was trying to force it open. The old lock groaned but held. "She's locked in the office," Vanessa said. "Marcus, get the key from the kitchen drawer." I set down the phone and moved to the window. It was the kind that cranked open, rusty from years of disuse, but it still worked. I pushed the glass outward and looked at the drop below. 3 feet, maybe 4. My knee would never survive the landing. But my knee wouldn't matter if I was dead. I heard footsteps running toward the kitchen. I had maybe 60 seconds before Marcus found the key. I climbed onto the window ledge, swinging my legs over the edge. The night air was cold against my face. The ground below looked impossibly far away. Behind me, I heard the door rattle again. "Mom, please, just open the door. We can talk about this." Talk. As if there was anything left to talk about. As if my son hadn't just spent the last hour positioning himself to push me down the stairs. I pushed off from the ledge. The fall seemed to take forever. When I hit the ground, pain exploded through my knee and hip and shoulder. I rolled onto my side, gasping, fighting the darkness that crowded the edges of my vision. "Get up. You have to get up." I forced myself to my hands and knees, then to my feet. My left leg buckled, but I caught myself against the house. Through the window above, I heard shouting. "She went out the window! Go around! I'll check the front." I hobbled toward the fence. Dorothy's house was maybe 200 yards away, lights glowing in the windows. If I could reach her, if I could get inside, a flashlight beam swept across the yard. I ducked behind the old tool shed, pressing myself against the rotting wood. "Evelyn," Vanessa's voice was closer now. "Come out. You're going to hurt yourself." I held my breath, listening to footsteps crunch through the fallen leaves. The flashlight passed over the shed, paused, moved on. "Check near the fence," Marcus said. "I'll look in the garden." I had to move. But my leg was useless, and every step sent agony shooting through my body. I couldn't outrun them. I couldn't hide forever. In the distance, I heard sirens. Vanessa heard them too. "What's that?" "Police?" She must have called someone. "We need to go, before they get here. Leave her. We'll say she was confused, wandering around in the dark. By the time anyone figures out what's going on, we'll be gone." Footsteps running toward the driveway, car doors slamming, an engine starting, headlights sweeping across the yard as they backed out. I stayed hidden behind the shed, listening to my son drive away, listening to the sirens get closer, listening to my own heartbeat, wild and erratic, but still there, still going. When the police cars pulled into the driveway, when the officers started calling my name, I finally let myself collapse. "Here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here." They found me curled behind the tool shed, covered in dirt and leaves, my left leg twisted at an unnatural angle. The paramedics arrived minutes later, strapping me to a stretcher, asking questions I was too exhausted to answer. In the ambulance, I told them where to find the evidence: the jewelry box with the false bottom, the documents proving what Marcus and Vanessa had done, the pills I had saved, the ones Vanessa had been feeding me for weeks. "We'll take care of it," the officer said, writing everything down. "You just rest now." I closed my eyes as the ambulance pulled away from the house where I had raised my children, buried my husband, lived my entire adult life. But the hardest part was still coming, because surviving was one thing. Facing what my son had become, facing it in court, in testimony, in the cold light of day, that was something else entirely. The ambulance radio crackled with an update. Marcus and Vanessa had been spotted heading north on I-95. State police were in pursuit. I lay on the stretcher and stared at the ceiling, wondering if this was what victory felt like. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss, like grief, like the slow death of every illusion I had ever had about family, love, and the people we choose to trust. But I was still breathing. And tomorrow, Christine would be here. Michael would be here. I would have family again, family that actually loved me, that wouldn't try to kill me for insurance money. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Tonight, I had survived. That was enough. The paramedic adjusted my IV and checked my blood pressure. "Try to stay calm, Mrs. Foster. Your heart rate is elevated. Someone just tried to kill me." "I think elevated is reasonable." He almost smiled. "Fair point. We're 10 minutes from VCU Medical Center. They'll take good care of you there." I closed my eyes and let myself drift. The morphine they had given me for the pain was softening the edges of everything. The terror, the betrayal, the image of my son's face when he realized I had outmaneuvered him. 45 years. That's how long I had been a mother. 45 years of sacrifice, of worry, of unconditional love. And in the end, I had been nothing more than a number on an insurance policy, a house to be sold, an obstacle to be eliminated. The ambulance hit a bump, and pain flared through my leg. But even that was distant now, muted by the drugs and the exhaustion, and the strange peace that comes after surviving something impossible. I thought about Frank, about whether he had known, at the end, what was happening to him. Whether he had suspected Vanessa, suspected Marcus, suspected anything at all. I hoped not. I hoped he had died believing his son loved him. Some truths were too terrible to face, but I had faced them. I was still facing them, and I would keep facing them for as long as it took to see justice done. The ambulance pulled into the hospital bay, and the doors swung open. Bright lights, voices calling instructions, hands transferring me from stretcher to gurney. The chaos of emergency medicine, the efficient choreography of people trained to save lives. I let them work. I let them take my vitals and examine my injuries and ask their questions. I told them about the poisoning, about the pills, about everything Vanessa had been feeding me for weeks. They drew blood, lots of blood, to test for whatever toxins might still be in my system. Through it all, I kept thinking about one thing. Tomorrow, Christine would be here. And together, We would make sure Marcus and Vanessa paid for every single thing they had done. Christine arrived at my hospital room at 8:47 a.m., her face pale with exhaustion and fear. "Mom!" She crossed the room in 3 quick strides and took my hand, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. I should have known something was wrong. I should have—" "You came," I said, squeezing her fingers. "That's what matters." Behind her, Michael stood in the doorway with another man, tall, dark-skinned, wearing a Richmond PD badge on his belt. They spoke quietly while Christine sat on the edge of my bed, her eyes cataloging every bruise, every bandage, every piece of evidence that her brother had tried to kill me. "They caught them," she said, "about 2 hours ago near the North Carolina border. They're being held without bail." I nodded slowly. The news should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt hollow. "There's more," Christine continued, her voice dropping. "Michael's been on the phone with the Richmond detectives all night. They found things at the house, Mom. Things that—" She trailed off, unable to continue. Michael stepped forward, his expression professional but kind. "Mrs. Foster, I need to tell you something difficult. The blood tests from last night showed high levels of digoxin in your system, much higher than your prescription should have caused. The pills you saved? They've been analyzed. They're not vitamins. They're a compound that weakens heart muscle tissue over time." I had known. On some level, I had known since the first night, but hearing it confirmed, hearing the clinical details of how my daughter-in-law had been systematically destroying my heart, that was different. "And Frank?" I heard myself ask. "My husband?" Michael exchanged a look with Christine. She nodded almost imperceptibly. "We've requested the exhumation of your husband's body. Based on the evidence at the house and the pattern of behavior, there's sufficient cause to investigate his death as a potential homicide." Frank. My steady, practical Frank, who had never hurt anyone in his life, who had trusted Marcus because that's what fathers do, who had probably looked at Vanessa every day without knowing she was counting the days until his death. "I want to see them," I said. Christine's head snapped up. "What? Marcus and Vanessa? Before the trial? Before the lawyers get involved? Before everything becomes about evidence and procedure? I want to look my son in the eye and ask him why." "Mom, I don't think that's a good idea. I've earned this, Christine. 45 years of raising that boy. 43 years of loving his father. I've earned the right to ask why." Michael cleared his throat. "Mrs. Foster, it's not my jurisdiction, but I might be able to arrange something. A controlled meeting at the Richmond County Jail, with officers present. If the detective in charge agrees. Make it happen," I said. "Please." The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. They moved me to a wheelchair for the transport. My knee was shattered beyond simple repair, and I wouldn't walk without a cane for the rest of my life. Another gift from my son and his wife. The Richmond County Jail was a squat, ugly building on the edge of downtown. Michael pushed my wheelchair through security checkpoints and down fluorescent-lit corridors that smelled of industrial cleaner and despair. Finally, we reached an interview room with a table bolted to the floor and cameras in every corner. Marcus was already there, handcuffed to his chair. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the orange jumpsuit and the harsh lighting. When he saw me, something moved behind his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or fear. It was gone too fast to name. "Mom," he said, "I'm glad you're okay." I stared at my son, this stranger wearing my child's face. "Are you? Are you really glad?" "Of course. I never wanted—" He stopped, catching himself. His lawyer, a tired-looking man in a rumpled suit, put a hand on his arm. "My client has been advised not to discuss the details of the case." "I don't care about the case," I said. "I care about why. That's all I want to know, Marcus. Why?" Silence stretched between us. The clock on the wall ticked. The cameras recorded. Finally, Marcus looked at his lawyer, who gave a barely perceptible shrug. "I owed people money," Marcus said quietly. "Bad people. The kind who don't accept excuses. Vincent Castellano." He flinched. "You know about that?" "I found the letters." "How much do you owe him?" $400,000. "It started smaller, but the interest—" He shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. It doesn't. What I want to know is when you decided that murdering your mother was a reasonable solution to your gambling debts." Marcus looked away. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Then how was it supposed to happen? Vanessa had a plan. She said, he stopped again, catching himself, that it would be peaceful, that you wouldn't suffer, that you'd just go to sleep and not wake up, and then everything would be taken care of. The house, the insurance, Vincent, all of it. I felt Christine's hand on my shoulder, heard her sharp intake of breath. But I kept my eyes on Marcus. And your father? Was his death peaceful too? Something broke in Marcus's face. The mask he'd been wearing crumpled, and for a moment I saw my little boy, the one who cried over dead goldfish, who needed me to check for monsters under the bed, who used to crawl into my lap and tell me he loved me. I didn't know about Dad, he whispered. I swear I didn't know, not until after. Not until Vanessa told me it was already done. You expect me to believe that? It's the truth. When Dad died, I thought it was just bad luck. Just a stroke, like the doctor said. I didn't find out until months later, when Vanessa told me we needed to do the same thing to you. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. My own son, I said slowly. The child I would have died for. You looked at me every day for months, knowing what your wife had done to your father, knowing what she was planning to do to me. You watched me get weaker. You watched me suffer. And you did nothing. I tried to stop her, Marcus said, his voice cracking. At the wedding, I told her it was wrong, that we should find another way. At the wedding? You mean 6 months ago, when I was already being poisoned? That's when you tried to stop her? I was scared, Mom. Vincent threatened to kill me if I didn't pay. And Vanessa said this was the only way. So you chose your fear over my life. Over your father's life. I leaned forward in my wheelchair, ignoring the pain that shot through my knee. You are not my son anymore, Marcus. Whatever you were, whatever I thought you were, that person is gone. Maybe he never existed at all. I'm going to testify at your trial. I'm going to tell the jury exactly what you did and exactly what you plan to do. And when they put you in prison, which they will, I hope you spend every single day thinking about what you threw away. I looked at Michael. I'm ready to go. As they wheeled me toward the door, Marcus called out, Mom, wait. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't turn around. In the hallway, Christine walked beside me, her hand on my shoulder. Neither of us spoke. There was nothing to say. We had both just watched the death of someone we loved. Not a physical death, but something worse. The death of the person we thought we knew. Vanessa's interview was scheduled for the next room, but I didn't want to see her. She wasn't family. She had never been family. She had been a predator who recognized an opportunity and exploited it with cold, calculated precision. But Marcus had been my son, my firstborn, the child I had nursed and raised and loved for 45 years. His betrayal cut deeper than anything Vanessa could have done. On the way back to the hospital, Christine held my hand in the back of Michael's car. What happens now? She asked. Now we bury your father properly. We honor his memory, and we make sure that what happened to him, what almost happened to me, never happens to anyone else. I looked out the window at the Richmond skyline, at the city where I had spent my entire adult life, where I had built a family that had crumbled to dust. Marcus made his choice. Now he lives with it. Christine squeezed my hand. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. Thank you for coming. Always. That's what family is for. Family. The word had meant something different to me a week ago. It had meant Marcus and Christine and Frank, the four of us against the world. Now it meant something smaller, something broken, but also something stronger. It meant Christine, who had dropped everything to save me. Michael, who had used every resource at his disposal to help a woman he barely knew. Emily, Christine's daughter, who had called me 3 times from Boston to make sure I was okay. It meant the family I had left, not the family I had lost. And that, I realized, was enough. Back at the hospital, the Richmond detective came to take my formal statement. Detective Patricia Sullivan was a woman about Christine's age, with gray streaks in her dark hair and a wedding ring she kept twisting as I talked. She listened without interrupting, her pen moving steadily across the pages of her notebook. When I finished, she looked up with something like admiration in her eyes. "Mrs. Foster, I've been doing this job for 22 years. I've seen a lot of victims, a lot of survivors. What you did, outsmarting them, documenting the evidence, getting a message out when you were isolated and poisoned and afraid, that took remarkable courage." "It took desperation," I corrected her, "and stubbornness. My husband always said I was the most stubborn woman he ever met." She smiled slightly. "Well, your stubbornness saved your life, and it's going to put two very dangerous people behind bars for a very long time." "What happens next?" "The DA is preparing charges. First-degree murder for your husband. Attempted first-degree murder for you. Conspiracy, fraud, forgery, the list goes on. Between the evidence you collected and the pills you saved, we have more than enough to guarantee convictions." "And Vanessa's role in Frank's death? Can you prove she actually did it?" Detective Sullivan nodded slowly. "The medical examiner is reviewing your husband's autopsy results in light of what we now know, and we've subpoenaed the pharmacy records from when Vanessa still had her license. There are discrepancies, large quantities of digoxin and other cardiac medications that were never properly accounted for." Digoxin, the same thing they had been giving me. Frank and I had both been killed, or nearly killed, by the same drug, administered by the same woman, in the same house. "There's one more thing," Detective Sullivan said, her voice careful. "We've been in contact with Vincent Castellano's people. Marcus owes them money, but they're cooperating with the investigation. Apparently, they don't appreciate being connected to murder charges. They've agreed to testify about Marcus's gambling debts and his requests for extensions. Even the loan sharks were turning on my son. There was a bitter irony there somewhere, but I was too tired to find it. Thank you, Detective." "Thank you, Mrs. Foster. Your testimony is going to be crucial when this goes to trial. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about sitting in a courtroom, facing Marcus and Vanessa across a room full of strangers, telling my story to a jury, describing how my son and his wife had tried to murder me, living through it all again, publicly, permanently. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." Detective Sullivan stood and shook my hand. "We'll be in touch. In the meantime, rest, recover. And if you need anything, protection, counseling, anything at all, here's my card." She left, and I was alone with the beeping monitors and the IV drip and the weight of everything that had happened. Christine had gone to the cafeteria to get food. Michael was coordinating with the local police. Emily had texted that she was flying down to help. I had more support now than I had had in months, maybe years. But I also had a hole in my chest where my son used to be, and no amount of support could fill that. I closed my eyes and let myself drift. Tomorrow there would be more questions, more statements, more logistics to handle. The trial would come, and I would testify, and Marcus and Vanessa would face justice. But tonight I just wanted to rest, to breathe, to remember Frank, and mourn him properly, now that I knew the truth about how he died. Somewhere in the hospital, a machine beeped steadily, a reminder that I was still alive, still breathing, still fighting, and that was going to have to be enough. The trial lasted 9 days. I sat in the front row of the courtroom every single day, my cane propped against the bench beside me, watching justice unfold in slow, methodical detail. Christine sat on one side, Michael on the other. Emily had flown down from Boston for the opening statements and the closing arguments, her hand warm in mine as the prosecutor laid out the case against my son and his wife. The evidence was overwhelming. The pills I had saved, the documents I had photographed, the emails between Marcus and Vanessa discussing the plan, the forged will, the fraudulent life insurance increase, the testimony from Vincent Castellano's people, who described in clinical detail how Marcus had begged for more time to pay his debts. And then there was Frank. The exhumation had confirmed what I already knew. My husband had been murdered. The toxicology report showed dangerously high levels of digoxin in his preserved tissue samples, the same drug Vanessa had been feeding me. The medical examiner testified that his stroke, was actually cardiac arrest, induced by systematic poisoning over several months. When that testimony came out, I heard Vanessa gasp from the defense table. She hadn't expected us to prove it. She had thought Frank's death was the perfect crime, undetectable and unprovable. Marcus took the stand in his own defense. His lawyer had advised against it, but Marcus insisted. He wanted to explain, he said. He wanted people to understand. I watched my son walk to the witness stand, his hands shaking, his face pale. He avoided looking at me as he was sworn in. "Foster," his lawyer began, "can you tell the jury about your relationship with your mother?" She was the best mother anyone could ask for." Marcus's voice cracked. "She always supported me, even when I failed, and I failed a lot. She never gave up on me. She let me and Vanessa move in after my law practice collapsed. She took care of us for years. And yet you're accused of conspiring to murder her. How do you respond to that?" I was desperate. Marcus looked at the jury, his eyes wet. I owed money to dangerous people. They threatened to kill me, to kill Vanessa. I didn't know what to do. And Vanessa, she said she had a way to fix everything. She said my mother was old, that she wouldn't suffer, that it would be quick and peaceful. "Did you participate in the poisoning of your mother?" I knew it was happening. I didn't stop it. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. "But I never touched the pills. I never put anything in her food or her tea. That was all Vanessa." From across the courtroom, Vanessa's face twisted with fury. She whispered something to her lawyer, who shook his head. "What about your father?" the prosecutor asked on cross-examination. "Did you know your wife was poisoning him too?" Marcus closed his eyes. "Not until after he was dead. Vanessa told me months later, when she started talking about doing the same thing to my mother. She said it had worked once, so it would work again." "And you didn't go to the police?" I was scared. Vincent's people had made it clear what would happen if I talked. And Vanessa... He stopped, swallowing hard. "Vanessa said if I tried to stop her, she would tell the police I had helped kill my father, that I would go to prison anyway. So you chose to let your mother die, rather than face the consequences of your wife's first murder?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. Vanessa's testimony was different. She denied everything, blamed everything on Marcus, claimed she was a victim of his manipulation. She cried on the stand, talking about how Marcus had threatened her, controlled her, forced her to participate in his schemes. The jury didn't believe her. Neither did I. On the 9th day, they delivered their verdict. Marcus was found guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder, attempted first-degree murder, and fraud. Not guilty of his father's death. The jury accepted that he hadn't known about that until later. The judge sentenced him to 20 years. Vanessa was found guilty on all counts. First-degree murder for Frank. Attempted first-degree murder for me. Conspiracy. Fraud. Forgery. The judge sentenced her to life without parole. When the sentences were read, Marcus turned and looked at me for the first time since the trial began. His eyes were full of tears, his face twisted with grief and guilt. "I'm sorry, Mom," he mouthed. I held his gaze for a long moment, then I turned away. Some apologies come too late. After the trial, life began again. Christine and Michael helped me sell the house in Richmond. I couldn't live there anymore. Couldn't walk the halls where Frank had been murdered. Couldn't sit in the kitchen where Vanessa had poisoned my tea. Couldn't sleep in the bedroom where I had lain awake planning my escape. I moved to Boston, to a small apartment near Christine and Emily. It wasn't much. 2 bedrooms, a view of the Charles River, a kitchen just big enough for one, but it was mine, and it was safe. The life insurance money from Frank's policy went into a trust for Emily's children, the great-grandchildren Frank and I had always talked about having someday. The money from the house went into a fund for victims of elder abuse, administered by a non-profit that Christine found. I didn't want to profit from what had happened. I just wanted to move forward. Dorothy Patterson visited me once, a few months after the move. She had driven all the way from Virginia with a jar of her strawberry preserves and a guilt that wouldn't let her rest. "I should have known," she said, sitting in my tiny living room with tears in her eyes. "I should have pushed harder, should have insisted on seeing you. If I had called Christine sooner, you couldn't have known," I told her. "None of us could have known. Not until it was almost too late. How do you do it? She asked. How do you forgive? I thought about the question for a long time before answering. I don't, I said finally. I don't forgive Marcus. I don't forgive Vanessa. What they did, what they took from me, is unforgivable. But I've let go of the anger. Not for them. For me. Because carrying that anger was killing me almost as surely as the poison. Dorothy nodded slowly. And the future? What do you do now? I looked out the window at the river, at the boats passing by, at the life continuing all around me. I live, I said. That's what Frank would have wanted. That's what I want. I wake up every morning. I eat breakfast with my daughter. I play cards with my great-grandchildren. I tend my little balcony garden, even though it's nothing like the one I had before. I write letters, not to Marcus, never to Marcus, but to the people who helped me, the detective, the prosecutor, Michael. All the people who made sure I got to have a future at all. And that's enough? It has to be. I took Dorothy's hand in mine. When I was hiding in that office, calling for help, I didn't know if I would survive the night. I didn't know if anyone would come. I didn't know if my own son would break down the door and finish what they started. But I kept fighting anyway, because that's what you do. You keep fighting until you can't anymore. Dorothy left with promises to visit again, and I sat alone in my apartment as the sun set over Boston. Christine would be by later with dinner. Emily was bringing the kids tomorrow. Michael was working on a case in Cambridge and would stop by on Thursday. I had family, I had safety, I had a life that was smaller than the one I'd had before, but no less full of meaning, and I had Frank, not in person, never again in person, but in memory, in the lessons he taught me, the love he gave me, the 43 years we shared before Vanessa took him away. He was with me every time I made his favorite recipe, every time I heard a song we used to dance to, every time I looked out at the water and remembered our anniversary trip to the coast. They had tried to take everything from me, my husband, my health, my life itself, and they had almost succeeded. But almost wasn't enough. Almost never is. I picked up my cane and walked to the balcony, where my little garden was blooming in the October sun. The roses were smaller than the ones I'd grown in Richmond, but they were mine. The tomatoes were finished for the season, but the herbs were still going strong. Life goes on. That's the only lesson that matters. No matter what happens, no matter how terrible the betrayal or how deep the loss, life goes on. I stood on my balcony, watching the sun set over Boston, and I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because everything was fine, but because I was alive, and I was free. And tomorrow I would wake up in a world where the people who tried to kill me were behind bars. That was enough. It would always be enough. Some victories don't feel like victories. They feel like survival. They feel like the end of something terrible and the beginning of something uncertain. But they're still victories. On the first anniversary of Frank's proper burial, the second funeral, the real one, where we finally laid him to rest knowing the truth about how he died, Christine and Emily took me to the cemetery. We stood together by his headstone, the three of us, while the October wind scattered leaves across the grass. He would be proud of you, Christine said. He would be furious, I corrected her. Furious at Marcus, furious at Vanessa, furious at himself for not seeing what was happening. I touched the cold granite of the headstone. But yes, I think he would be proud too. Emily placed a bouquet of white roses against the stone. Frank's favorite. Grandma, do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't heard them that night? If you'd just gone to bed like normal? I thought about the question. I thought about the tea I would have drunk, the pills I would have swallowed, the peaceful death they had planned for me. I thought about waking up, or rather not waking up, while Marcus and Vanessa calmly reported finding my body in the morning. I try not to, I said, because that's not what happened. I heard them. I fought back. I survived. And dwelling on the alternative doesn't change anything. We stayed at the cemetery for an hour, sharing stories about Frank, crying a little, laughing a little more. By the time we left, the sun was setting over Boston, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Christine drove me home. Emily went back to her apartment, promising to visit tomorrow with the kids. I climbed the stairs to my front door, unlocked it with the key I kept on a chain around my neck, and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, mine. On the kitchen counter sat a card that had arrived that morning. No return address, but I knew who it was from. Marcus had been allowed to write me 1 letter per month, though I never responded. I picked up the card and looked at it for a long moment. Then I walked to the trash can and dropped it in, unopened. Some doors, once closed, stay closed forever. Some wounds never heal. Some family bonds, once broken, cannot be repaired, but other bonds can be strengthened. Other families can be built. Other lives can flourish in the ashes of what was lost. I turned off the kitchen light and walked to my bedroom, where a photograph of Frank smiled at me from the nightstand. I touched the frame gently, said goodnight, and turned out the light. Tomorrow, I would wake up. Tomorrow, I would have breakfast with my daughter. Tomorrow, I would live. And that was everything.